Welcome to Mac Advantage, Professional Perspectives in Accounting. My name is Scott Showalter. I'm the director of the Jenkins Master's Accounting Program at NC State. We are very fortunate today to have Christine Botosan join us. Christine's 10-year term on the Financial Accounting Standards Board ends June 30th, 2026. Christine has served in a variety of leadership roles prior to the FASB being appointed in July 1st, 2016 at the University of Utah and at the American Accounting Association. And for a fun fact about Christine, she's a Chartered Accountant of Canada. That's the first one of those we've had on this.
There you go.
So welcome. Our careers have crossed in a variety of ways. I won't go how many years, Christine. I'll just keep that out there.
Thank you.
But at this time, I'm just going to jump into the first question and ask Christine, which is a question we normally ask most of our guests, which is you have served in a variety of roles in your career. Please provide us a brief summary of those career experiences.
Happy to do so. And thanks, Scott, so much for inviting me to do this. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. Mm-hmm. So I started my career in public accounting. I worked in public accounting for about 5 years. And then throughout that time, my passion was always teaching. I had taught accounting students as a tutor in college and in high school, and just always loved teaching. And eventually I decided that that was really where my future path needed to be, was in education. And I was quite young when I made that decision. That was a long time ago. And in order to have what I felt would be a very full career in education, I felt it was essential for me to get a PhD. And that is what led me to the United States and to the University of Michigan, where I did got my PhD in business administration. And then I took my first academic position at Washington University in St. Louis. And I was there for 5 years and eventually got the opportunity to move to the University of Utah. And that was where I spent most of my academic career. I went through all of the different phases of promotion at the University of Utah, all the way up to full professor with a chair. And then spent some time as an associate dean for graduate programs, and also some time working in the provost's office as special assistant to the provost. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time as an academic. I loved the research side of what that career brought. I also really love the interaction that I had with students and the impact that you feel that you have as a professor. And so that was very special. But, I kind of felt like I had done everything I wanted to do in the academy. And right around that moment, the FASB came knocking on the door and asked me if I would consider joining the board as the academic board member. And that brought me to the FASB in 2016. And as you noted, Scott, I'm pretty close to the end now. I've only got nine months or so left to go. So it's been an awesome 10 years.
Absolutely. So let's kind of explore some of that a little bit. You mentioned you are a current board, soon to finish up your term. I'm sure our audience would like to know, what does a board member do anyway? How does that work anyway?
Yeah, so the FASB is responsible for creating US GAAP for public companies, private companies, and not-for-profit organizations. And so my primary role as a board member is becoming an expert on whatever the topic is in front of the board, and then using that knowledge and judgment to vote on what I think is the most appropriate solution that will provide the best information to investors to make resource allocation decisions in a cost-effective way for companies to provide that information. So there's always this balance between cost and benefit. So part of what I spend my day doing is reading memos that are prepared by our staff, because they're kind of like our research assistants. They go out and they gather all the information, and then they communicate what they're learning to the board through board memos. So a lot of the time is just spent reading, thinking, doing some additional work on my own if I don't understand something, talking to staff, just really trying to ensure that I have an in-depth understanding of the issue, so I can make an informed judgment when I vote as a board member. Sometimes that results in me ending up in the same place with the rest of the board. Sometimes it results in, and this isn't just unique to me, any board member potentially ending up in a different place than a majority of the board. And when you end up in a different place, then another part of the job is to craft your dissent, if it's a final standard, or what we'll refer to as an alternative view if we're at the exposure draft stage, where you explain why you don't agree with the decision of the majority. If you think there was a better solution, what you think that better solution would be and why. So part of the time I spend writing dissents or alternative views. Also, as a board member, we spend a lot of time engaging with stakeholders. So doing this type of activity with you today, Scott, or for me being the academic, a lot of presentations to student groups, classes, speaking at conferences, doing FASB updates, talking about, FASB activities to the public. And then as the academic board member, I continued the tradition of other academic board members, in that I continued to write and publish as a board member. I've written 5 papers that have been published while I've been here over the last 10 years. I've written 2 book chapters with co-authors, both of which have been published. And I've written a forthcoming book on conceptual frameworks for financial reporting, or essentially a theory of financial reporting, which I hope to publish in the near term. So that's kind of a day in the life.
Yeah, it's a lot in that day of the life. And I'm not surprised by your last one on conceptual framework, because I know I've sat through many of your presentations about your views about the conceptual framework, which most people probably are not even aware what we're talking about right now, but that's
that could be true.
As your time on the board is coming to an end, and you reflect back over that 10-year period that we're talking about, describe maybe some accomplishments that you're particularly proud of, something you were able to maybe get done during your period on the board.
Yeah, I think that really it comes back to the standards that we've issued while I was a board member, that I felt or believe are going to have the most significant impact on investors and provide significantly better information for investors to make their resource allocation decisions. So on that list, I would include the disaggregation of income statement expense project, the income tax disclosure improvements project, and our accounting for long duration insurance contracts, which took essentially 100-year-old accounting model and brought it kicking and screaming in some ways into the present. And I think is a much better information as a result for investors that are interested in investing in insurance companies. So those are kind of 3 of the projects that I guess I'm most proud of, all of which I supported. But I'm also proud of some of the dissents that I've written as well, because I think an important part of our process is giving voice to those minority views. So the dissent that I wrote on cloud computing implementation costs with a fellow board member, and a dissent that'll be coming out soon on government grants accounting would be 2 examples. And I think in both of those cases, in particular with government grants, I wrote the dissent because I don't think we solved the problem. And if we didn't solve the problem, then it means it's going to come back at some point. And that's the role of a dissent, is to be there so that if you're right and the problem wasn't solved and it does come back, hopefully it gives a starting point for future board members to think about a different approach.
Great, great. Well, thank you. Yeah. As we reflect on a standard setter, I'm sure you've heard the criticism from time to time about standard setters. Why does it take so long? And your point and all that. So as you think about being a standard setter, what are some of the real challenges you think standard setters are facing as they go forward in this area in today?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that there's some big problems out there that we just haven't been able to solve, right? Problems like accounting for goodwill, business combination accounting, distinguishing between liabilities and equity, structuring the financial statements, producing a statement of cash flows that investors feel is providing them with decision useful information. Um, uh, uh, those are just some of what we often hear described as the unsolvable problems of financial reporting. And I think that they have been unsolvable and they continue to be unsolvable because we don't have consensus around what the solutions are. And when we don't have consensus among stakeholders about a solution, it makes it really, really hard to move forward for the board to reach consensus and for us to get to a solution that actually achieves the objective of financial reporting. That's where I think the conceptual framework is really critically important, right? Because if you have a strong theory of financial reporting that is linked to recognition, measurement, and element definitions and all these principles that are built to achieve the objective of financial reporting, that should help you create the roadmap for solving those problems when there isn't consensus among what the solution should be that would achieve the objective of financial reporting. And yet, I don't think that we currently have a conceptual framework that's robust enough to help us address these problems. If we did, then I think we would have addressed them by now, because these have been problems for 100 years. I mean, this is not new. So I think that's one of the challenges facing standard setters is that, that there are some of these just chronic problems that we haven't been able to solve. And I think as standard setters, we need to figure out why that is and fix that challenge.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you asked that, because you're not the only standard setter having those issues. That when you said that, there's a variety of standard setters are struggling with that. And and you mentioned rightfully so, it's also the users. They're part of your process.
Yeah.
And they can help. They haven't solved it either, right? So from that perspective, okay.
Yeah.
So, talk about being around a profession for a little while, and as you reflect on where the profession is and where it's going, what's your views about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like with every industry, we're in an interesting time right now with AI and not knowing how that's going to impact the profession, all the way from the standard setting activity through the application of those standards, the production of financial reporting, the auditing of financial reports, or the consumption of financial reports. I mean, it's potentially impacting every aspect. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that now is very important for all of us to pay a lot of attention to how technology is changing and thinking about how to make the best use of that technology in order to meet the mission of financial reporting, which is to provide decision useful information to investors. So I think that that's one thing that I'm keeping in mind. The other thing I would say is that, as accountants, we're producing a product that is consumed by a particular group that we're targeting, investors. And I think it's really important for all of us, the preparers in that production chain, the auditors in that production chain, to understand the consumer and what is it that the investor needs? How do they use information? What type of information do they need? At what frequency do they need that information? Um, I think that we really need to double down on our focus on investors, because if we end up with a product that is not meeting the consumer's need, and the consumer says, okay, well, we'll just go elsewhere, then you got to question, what is it that we're actually doing at that point. So I think that it's really, really important for accountants in the production chain to be very focused in understanding how investors use the information that we're producing.
Yeah, Christine, I think that last point is particularly important in today's world of AI, because there can be an alternative source now. I think standard setters need to be aware of that. I'm glad you brought that one up. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the softball question. In your spare time, when you're not advancing counting standards for global use, what do you do?
What do I do? Well, I've got a lot of hobbies. So I guess number one, I certainly enjoy spending time with my family and my friends. But I'm also an avid knitter. So I like to make all sorts of things for family members or friends that are having children, or baby blankets, shawls, scarves, sweaters, you name it. I like to knit. I also love to cook and try new recipes and try complicated things just to challenge myself to see if I can do it or not. Um, I'm also very interested in wine education, and so I've been studying wine for about 20 years, and so I like to keep pushing forward on learning more about different regions, different grapes, and different vinification methods, and so forth. I also love to read, so that's another thing that I enjoy doing. And I would say, walking and hiking and getting some exercise along the way is always part of my day as well.
Great. I know when you and I first met, you were an advocate skier, but that's probably passed on now at this point. But it is outside, so it's something that you've enjoyed doing.
It is, and I actually hope I'll get back to skiing. We're moving back to Utah when I'm done at the board, and maybe once I'm back there, I'll be able to get back into skiing
Great.
as well.
At some point, we can have a correlation between your study of wine and standard setting. There must be some correlation there.
Yeah, I don't think we'll go into that.
I think there'll be something there. So with that, I will give you the opportunity for one last comment here before we bring this to a close.
Yeah. I guess in thinking about students and folks that maybe are early in their careers, the one advice that I would give is it's always important to do your homework, right? You never want to go into a class or into a meeting or into any discussion caught flat-footed. So you always, want to put your best foot forward, and that means being prepared. But the other piece of advice, I guess I would give is that as you think about your career, as opportunities come along, don't be afraid to take risks because that's really how you advance. So you want to make sure they're informed risks. So you want to do your homework, know what you're getting into, go with your gut and understand whether this feels like it's a good decision. But then don't let fear hold you back. Fear of the unknown. Will I rise to the occasion? Will I like living in that new city, or in my case, country, moving from Canada to the United States? I think it's only by taking risks that we push ourselves, that we learn, and that we, make a path through a career that can be very rewarding. So don't be afraid of risk, because you might end up missing out on something that could really be a great opportunity.
Absolutely. Appreciate those comments. And I want to thank you for joining us today and sort of pulling the curtain back a little bit so our viewers here can understand a little bit how standard setting works. I'm sure that's a mystery to most people, and I really appreciate your insights into that today. Thank you.
Happy to be with you, Scott. Thank you.